Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And today we're on about some rambling on. Okay, there was like 3 minutes of me ranting about the Hannah TV show because I did try to finish the first episode like I said I would last week. But the long and short of it is that it's not good, so I didn't finish the first episode. I got rid of the 3 minutes and just put in this little summary instead. Moving on to my journey to Quetzaltenango, also known as Xela. I'm just going to talk about my very first few steps into Xela and my Airbnb because it's surprising. I made it to Xela, second biggest city in Guatemala, which is kind of shocking because it's small. If that's the second biggest city in Guatemala, it's pretty wild because, yeah, it's a tiny city. It's difficult to call it a city. I walked literally across the whole thing in, I think, an hour and 15 minutes, maybe. I took one of the cross-country buses they have, a chartered bus. It was the first thing I found, the private buses. I didn't realize there was a whole cheap local bus, chicken buses, I guess some of them call them online. But still, it was only 90 quetzals, so, I don't know, $12 maybe. And it's a 3-hour drive. A 3-hour drive. Is it even a 3-hour ride in Gilligan's Island? I don't think I've ever made that joke before. I'm on the spot performing for you. Okay, so the ride was very comfortable, but we did go fast. And it's not like we went fast on an American highway where it's straight for literally 1,000 miles. We were on switchbacks on the top of sheer cliffs. Because we're already at 5,000 feet high, and then Quetzaltenango, or Xela, is another 3,000 feet, so we're almost 8,000 feet high, and he's just slamming the gas and whipping around corners so that you can feel the bus like tipping, and you literally slide across your seat left and right as they take these big turns. And I was kind of shocked because there's been one accident since I got to Guatemala, but after I was on what's like a safer ride, it was safer than the chicken bus I got on more recently down to Panajachel, which I'll talk about probably next time. But it was still it felt precarious, and I was like, oh, and I totally see how a bus dropped off a mountain, and I'm surprised more buses haven't dropped down mountains recently, because these roads are not wide. They are tiny little roads, and there's no hiking trails. You gotta take one of these buses if you're gonna get around Guatemala. Or you can ride like the guy I knew from the supermarket rode his motorcycle 8 hours north to visit his family, and then 8 hours back over 2 days, over one weekend, because he had a couple days off from his supermarket job. And that's also insane, because the roads are so thin and nobody is particularly worried about you being there. They're pretty careful, like they're pretty courteous. If you're going to cross the street, a car will stop for you like half the time in Guatemala. But on the highway, people pass each other without checking. They certainly pass each other around bends, not every time, but they're not worried really. If they're on a bike, they'll just zoop right around, and if there's a car there, they'll be like, oh, and hit the brake and slide back behind the car they were about to pass on the highway on a roundabout. And when I say highway, I mean there's 2 lanes. I say highway just because it's the main well-maintained road between 2 cities, but this is a 2 car lengths wide highway. It's not a huge road. That said, we did make it to Xela fine, and then I walked from the bus station down to my Airbnb, which the Airbnb is probably going to be the brunt of this episode, because it was surprising. First of all, the addresses are weird because half the time on Google it gives you coordinates, like not an address, but there are actual addresses for all the places, and all the locals use the name of the street address, but Google has the wrong street address all the time. Waze seems to have better maps for Guatemala, So if you do decide to go to Guatemala, which does rock, I would say use Waze instead of Google, even though I didn't. I just used my offline Maps.me. Okay, but let me tell you about my Airbnb, which looked a little weird, and I was like, I don't think I should get this one. But I was curious, and I was only staying for a week anyway, and I was like, I mean, at the worst, I can handle a week. At the worst, I can just leave if it's a total something completely wrong. Airbnb is pretty generous with being like, yes, that's not a real place. Okay, here, we'll rebook you a place with the money you already paid in a new place. But this is not a cautionary tale. If you take the very normal precautions of, does your host answer when you message them? Does the ad look legitimate? Are there lots of reviews? You're not going to run into any of the stuff I'm about to talk about. It's sort of a hobby of mine to find the weird new hosts that don't know what they're doing. So I wasn't too worried, and I was on an adventure, I was finally getting out of staying in the same city for like 3 months. And I did. But my friend, Cynthia, told me that I could go to Xela if I wanted to, but Xela is pretty much just Guatemala City, but tinier. And I was like, oh, really? Like, people talk about it like it's a whole different kind of thing. She was like, yeah, I don't know. When I was there, it's just like a tiny city. There's still a lot of traffic, so if you don't like that, you're not really going to like Xela that much. And she's right. I was very surprised. I showed up in Quetzaltenango, and when I was walking from the bus station down to my Airbnb, the bus station's like in the cardinal north of town, and my Airbnb was in the cardinal southeast. There were more trees in Xela and like more apparent mountains close to the city as compared to Guatemala City, but it still had the industrial Guatemala City feel. I was walking and there was a whole bunch of traffic and everything just kind of seemed similar. It was definitely smaller. It's a smaller city by far, but it was just a tiny city. There was still a lot of traffic that I didn't really like. And after 20 minutes of walking, I was like, well, she was right. And I let her know that, yep, this is just a tiny Guatemala city. But Cabro is from Xela. And so I did want to get a Cabro beer while I was in Xela and take a picture of it for the Beer with a View communities online, because that's as social as I will ever be. Also, a guy on the bus who's from Xela was talking to me, and I was like, wow, his English is pretty good for a Guatemalan. And then he told me that he was just visiting Guatemala, and he's actually lived in the United States for 40 years. And I was like, oh, well, maybe it should be better after 40 years? But then I was like, well, you know people who were in China for almost 30 years, and they didn't learn any Chinese, so can't be too harsh on someone. But I don't know what his situation was or anything. From working until 4 a.m. like usual, I worked through the night for audio stuff, and then took the bus early morning so that I would be sure I got to Xela sometime during the day, no matter what went wrong with the buses on the highway, which I was assured something will go wrong. And something did go wrong, but not on the trip to Xela, on the trip from Xela to Panajachel, which I'll get to in the next episode, I think. Because I haven't even got to the Airbnb yet. Okay. I talked to a nice guy on the bus. That was the whole story. And he told me that May was the craziest rainy season in Guatemala, in Quetzaltenango specifically. Like, all the rain was coming down. It has half as much rain as Seattle, not through the whole year. The annual yearly rainfall of Seattle, half of that amount happens in 1 month in Quetzaltenango. So it rains pretty much constantly in Quetzaltenango in May, except when I was there, which was the first week of May, like May 6th to the 13th. So actually almost the second week of May. Yeah, that's so weird that there wasn't much rain there. Anyway, there was no rain, so I was able to walk across the city to my Airbnb. And then it didn't rain the whole day, and it didn't rain the next day. It rained a few times, but it seemed just like on and off regular, kind of like Seattle weather. It didn't seem like half of Seattle's annual rainfall was falling during this 1 month, which almanachically it was supposed to. So I get to my Airbnb. I ask a nice lady down the crooked alleys, hey, where's this place? And she said, oh, just follow the numbers because all the numbers are posted right in front of the doors and you're on the right street. And I was like, oh. And the numbers are all separated by a hyphen, and I thought the hyphen meant something, but you can just leave out the hyphen and just use, it doesn't matter, just follow the numbers. And it just made sense to me all of a sudden how simple the numbering system was. So I did. I followed the addresses, and then I realized she must not have been from around here because we were standing almost in front of the door that I was supposed to go to. So I did. I followed that, and I was right next to a huge church. And while I had booked this reservation, the host hadn't answered me right away, and they seemed kind of harried, I'll say, like kind of busy or preoccupied whenever they did answer me. But it had a bidet, it had a private attached bathroom. I kind of wanted to see what would happen. I just was like, yeah, it looks nice enough. The pictures looked nice. Although the pictures, they did have writing on the pictures like it was a flyer, rather than a candid photo that they took with their phone. And I was like, that's weird. But like I said, I clocked it as a little weird, but I'm very interested in new, maybe weird stuff. And it didn't feel dangerous. I ended up arriving over an hour early. And originally, I said I would arrive at 3 p.m. So I hung out at the bus station for a second, checked my map, and then messaged my host that I was on my way. I would be a couple hours or something. I figured walking would take me a little time, and then I would arrive closer to our agreed-upon time. So I texted the host, is it okay if I show up a little early? Maybe an hour early? And the host didn't answer. I've only had 3 hosts in Guatemala, and both the first and second did not answer very quickly. Or at all sometimes. My new host in Panajachel has answered me very quickly. But my first landlord in Guatemala was super slow and didn't really address any issues. But the place was nice, so I didn't really care, and I liked the neighborhood a lot. And then my second host in Xela was also super slow and didn't address any of my issues. Like my issues with the room specifically and how they differed from the advertisement of the room or the listing as portrayed. So anyway, she doesn't answer me. I get to the place and I ring the door buzzer around 1:30 or so. And she answers, Kai, hey, come in. And then the first thing she says is, I didn't know you were coming. You're here really early. And that's like a bad sign because I had booked the room a week prior and then messaged her as soon as I got off the bus at the bus terminal and knew I had a couple hours walking ahead of me for her to have time to make everything ready. And I was pretty close to the scheduled arrive time anyway. So even with a week of prep time and then on the day a couple hours of prep time, she was already throwing up disclaimers. And I said, I don't know how long the bus will take, but I'm estimating 3 p.m. And it wasn't like I arrived at 11 a.m. I was 1:45, so I was like a little over an hour early. And I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And then I walked in and I didn't clock it right away, but it made an impression of, uh-oh. And I was like, wait. And I walked back out to check it like after she introduced me to the room itself inside. And the whole front yard is an abandoned swing set, abandoned children's playground, like straight up Resident Evil, red rusted metal and all this stuff. So it looks ominous walking in. But it didn't feel ominous. It didn't feel scary, it didn't feel threatening or anything like that when I was in the house. It felt like a family home, but it was dirty. Now, she talked to me a lot, this host, and it became very quickly apparent that she had 2 kids, she was a single mother, she was trying to start up this Airbnb thing, but had no idea how the internet worked or anything, and she showed me to my room, which the bed sheets did not smell bad. The bed sheets smelled just like normal bed sheets, and the shower tiles were clean. And that's about what I can say for the positive parts of this room. There's a skylight, 1 meter by 1. Oh, actually, where we should start is that it wasn't the room in the advertisement. It was just not that room. I don't know if that room existed anywhere in the house. So the first thing I noticed was, oh, this is a totally different room than on that listing. And she took me in and showed me the bathroom and the toilet. And she was like, see, it's really clean. And it wasn't clean. Like the inside of the bowl was stained black with black streaks. Like the water part of the toilet was clean, the toilet bowl. That was correct because that's where she put in the chemical probably and then flushed away the paint or whatever that was. But everywhere above the water line still had black streaks. And one of the toilet seat hinges were broken, so it was off at an angle and you couldn't put it straight. The sink also had those black stains too. They just looked like old paint. The shower worked, but she was like, it's super hot, so you kind of have to move it, like move the switch, because there's a switch on Guatemalan showers for the heat, on the shower head itself, separate from the water knobs. Back and forth from cold to hot, and then you'll get a nice like medium. I was like, okay. And she was like, it seems like a hassle, but it's not a hassle. That would have been a hassle, but I knew what the problem was with the shower, and I was like, well, I can fix that in like 5 minutes, so whatever. She's also explaining everything in Spanish, which at this point is okay. It's been 3 months. I'm remembering most things. Even if I don't understand 100% what someone's saying, I know most of the words, so it was okay that she was explaining most of this in Spanish. And then she explained that I had a workstation, which was a table with a tablecloth that said sample text on it and was laid over it. But that's fine. It was a work table. That's good. Because I didn't notice for 2 days, and then I was wondering what it said, and I realized it just said sample text one day, and I really liked that little detail of the room. There was a big cabinet with trash bags lining the shelves. Not sure why. I figured all these rooms had been closed off for some amount of time, so that was like a dust guard. It looked like all of these rooms, because she did show me a couple other rooms, and they were a complete mess. But my room looked like she had put sheets on the bed recently that she had washed, because those sheets were clean. There was a giant spider in one of the sheets. And then there was a huge clump of like hair and dust, like huge as in the size of my fist. After she left, I picked up one of the pillows just to put on the other one to lay down. And when I picked it up, I don't know if it was right under or what, but there was a fist-sized clump of oily hair and dirt. And I was like, oh, that's a problem. That's a lot of dirt. But the pillows smelled like they were freshly laundered. And like I said, the blankets had 0 scent at all, which again was impressive as I'll go on here. She showed me the bed, and that was pretty much it. When she turned on the shower to show me, I saw like 3 of the holes in the shower worked, and I was like, okay, I'll just fix the shower while I'm here. Because they like clog up with calcium or minerals, and then all you have to do is clean the little holes in the shower, and it works normal for a couple weeks until the minerals build up. But I was only going to be there for a week anyway, so that wasn't a huge issue. But she started talking to me and asked me what my story was, and she told me her story. And then she was like, but the door has no lock on it, which I hadn't noticed until that point. And she said, oh, but do you want a lock? Or no? No, you don't want a lock, no? And I was like, oh, I do need a door that like locks because I have all of my stuff in here. And she said, oh, don't worry about that. Your stuff is safe here. You don't really need a lock. There's no one else here, only me. And I work most days, so it'll just be you every day except for Saturday and Sunday, really. So it's just you and me. Also, I do have 2 children. They will be here every day, all day Saturday, Sunday, and then mornings and evenings when they're not at school, Monday through Friday. Also, there is a man who lives across the hall from you here, and she pointed diagonally across the hall to another room, where apparently a man was staying. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just you and me. This is where like you and your kids live. And then also there's a guy across the hall. She was like, yeah. Also, there's a couple behind your room living in another room, and they live there. So there's 6 of us in here besides you. So there's 7 of us all together. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. I will need a lock for the door though. That's a lot of people and, you know. And she was like, yeah, totally. I'll get you a lock. Can I give you it tomorrow? I go to work tomorrow, and when I get back from work, I'll get back at like 5 or 6. I can give you the lock. And there were holes on the door in the door frame for a padlock to fit into. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I just was like, well, if I go out, I'll just go out for an hour. I'll be close in the neighborhood and I'll come right back. And then she explained, also, there are 6 cats here. No, little cats. Baby cats? Kittens. Kittens. There are 6 kittens right now here. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I can see them because we're standing in the hallway and there's 6 kittens all around us. And a couple bigger cats. I was like, it looks like there's 2 cats also, plus the 6 kittens. She was like, those are their parents. Yeah, there's also the 2. So there's 8 cats. These small cats, I'm going to give them around the neighborhood and like sell them soon. But they have to like grow up for a week or 2 here with their parents. So they'll be here for like 2 weeks and then they'll be gone. You don't even have to worry about it. And I'm only going to be there for a week. So I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm fine with kittens. I like cats. She's like, okay, great. Let me show you the kitchen. And the kitchen is a wreck. It has a working gas stove. It has 2 microwaves that do not work, but are in there. Don't know why. And you can plug them in and the lights come on, but they both don't work. I don't use microwaves anyway. It's just, this was such a bizarre situation. I feel like I should mention the microwaves. I use chairs to put a comforter over and then speak into the microphone like that, just a simple audio setup, so that the sound waves don't bounce all around the room. And so I asked if I could use one of the chairs at the table. When I picked it up, I saw that it was broken. Like the seat of the chair itself was completely broken, which doesn't matter to me for the high-backed chairs, but she kept explaining to me, don't sit on the chairs. They won't work. Don't sit on them. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to put a blanket on top of them. Okay, as long as you don't sit on them, because they're broken. But there were a lot of pans to use. The stove worked. There was a working refrigerator. She was like, this second shelf is all yours. You're free to use the stovetop as much as you want. And I said, okay, great. That sounds good to me. And she was like, just don't let any of the cats in here. And I was like, oh, yeah, cats can be messy. She was like, if you let the cats in here, they're going to break stuff and make a mess. And I was like, no, I get it. They're very messy creatures, especially kittens. No, I won't let any of them in here. Yeah, so if you open the door, make sure a cat's not coming in. Because if it's in here and the door closes, it's going to make a mess everywhere. And I was like, yeah, no, I get it. So just keep them out of the door. And I was like, okay. Her kids must have let in the cats a bunch of times or something. And she was like, this is your water, so you can just drink as much water as you want. And it was like an office cooler water tank thing. There was like half a gallon, maybe a couple liters. And I was like, oh, is there a place to refill it, like a water filter? Because I do drink a lot of water. So this will probably be gone by tomorrow. And she was like, well, I'll just fill it up. Or if you want more water, I can just order it for you and then you can buy it. And I was like, don't you have to provide drinking water? Isn't that one of the rules of Airbnb? But I was like, okay, because I was like, I'm just going to deal with this for a week and then I'll be gone. And it was only 10 quetzal, so it's like $1.15 or whatever for a huge water cooler tanker. But after I got that extra water jar, I found out that what she meant was you buy it and then we'll all use it, because I didn't use all of it in the next 2 days, but it was gone after the next 2 days. After that jug was gone, the one I bought for 10 quetzales or whatever, she asked if I wanted another one, and I was like, yeah, sure. And then she said, okay, I'll get it. And then she just didn't get it. So I just started boiling water in teapots, and that was fine. I asked her about the Wi-Fi. She told me she couldn't read the router for the password. So I went over and read it and then gave it to her. And she asked me how she could put it on the Airbnb listing. And I showed her. But she just looked so rushed and exasperated and like barely alive that I wasn't going to complain to Airbnb about any of this, which if she was a rude person or just a not nice person, or if anything was dangerous, then I probably would have reported it to Airbnb and went somewhere else. But it was clear that she just had no idea what she was doing. She put this listing on too early. She didn't ask anyone for advice or watch a YouTube video about how to set up an Airbnb. She didn't follow any of the rules of the Airbnbs. And I figured I could talk to her after a couple days. I was exhausted that day. I worked through the night and then got on a morning bus, and then I was in Xela, so I hadn't slept for a while. But I figured I'd talk to her a little bit later. let her know that I stay in a lot of Airbnbs and just tell her a few things she can do so that her guests will feel more comfortable. Except I didn't really see her again. I saw her one more time in the whole week I was there. And I messaged her a few times, but she didn't really get back to me. And again, it was very clear that it was because she was taking care of her 2 kids by herself, in addition to a full-time job. And she just didn't know what she was doing. But the last thing she said to me before I stopped talking to her on that introductory day was, okay, so just like for the rating, give me a 5-star. And I was like, oh. And I was going to say, I have to stay here first and then see how I like it. But she forestalled what I was going to say and continued on with, or a 4-star if whatever you're honestly feeling, a 4 or 5-star, whatever you're honestly feeling, 5 or 4, you can just write that in the review. Also write nice things in the review so that other foreigners will want to come here. And you know what? I wanted to help her, but I don't give Airbnb reviews under 4 stars because they're usually like this mom. They're usually like a mom who's doing this for the first time and she's doing her best and she just doesn't understand that the standards of a hosted domicile that someone is renting from you, and the standards are listed on the service that you are providing this room on, they have to be met, just the bare minimums. Like when we walked in the room, she was just like, oh yeah, there's dust everywhere because dust just comes down from the ceilings. The ceilings are old, so there's like dust everywhere, but I've swept it like 100 times. I can't get rid of the dust. And there was dust everywhere. The whole time I was there, the floor was dusty, and I slowly got rid of it because I would walk on it, it'd get on my feet, I'd wash them off in the shower. But at the end of the week, there was still a bunch of dust on the floor. Even after the dust in my room was gone, the dust in the whole rest of the area, that whole building, there was dust everywhere else that was never cleaned up. So I would track that back into my room because I had to walk down a couple corridors and whatever to get back into my room. Dusty corridors. There was less dust because I cleaned it up with my feet and the shower, but it was a dusty place altogether. But she wasn't being ill-intentional. She wasn't trying to take advantage of other people. This is a pretty low-income country. This was not a crazy room to find when you're just renting rooms in Guatemala in general. It's just not what you want to list, and then have the listing show a completely clean room with a new shower, toilet, new painted walls. Show it what it is, because people like me, if it's a dirty place and you make it cheaper, I don't care. Sure, I'll pay $4 less for the dirty room. But if you say it's clean and then I show up and it's covered in dust, or if you say you have a bidet and there's no bidet, or if you say it's a private room but the door doesn't lock. Oh, I also found out that the curtains are so sheer you can see right through them. So I had been changing for a couple days, and then when I walked outside my room, I looked in one time with the light on and I was like, oh, you can see right through these curtains. Good to know. That's a problem. So I haven't left a review for that particular quarter because I'm pretty sure if she has more time, she's going to clean it up. And I had a list. I kept a list of things to talk to her about because I have done that with other Airbnb people before. I've been like, hey, look, this is not what you said in the ad. I got her place largely because of the bidet in the ad, which was not there in the room. And she asked me if I needed each item, like, do you need the towel? Yeah, I need the towel. Okay. Do you need the soap? I was like, yeah, I'll use the soap. Do you need the toothpaste? I was like, no. She was like, great, I'll take that. And took it back. She was like, do you need... And she took like half the things because I said I wasn't going to use them. But just check that stuff beforehand so you don't put it out and then take it away when it's in front of the guest standing there. That's a weirder time to take back the toiletries or necessities. I was using my backwoods bidet, my little bottle bidet. So I was like, well, I'm not going to use the toilet paper. And she was like, oh, you're not? And like grabbed it like that was oh my gosh. She must have had one roll extra. And all of that said, she gave me a couple chairs. She gave me an extra comforter so that I could set up a little studio inside the room and do this. After I cleaned the shower, I didn't really have to fix much, actually. It worked good. I tried to use it for like 2 days, I think, with the crappy blocked spigot holes. But like I said, only 5 of them worked, so the water was burning hot. Burning hot. But after I cleaned out all the holes in the spigot, it worked fine. It worked normally. Oh, and then the first time I used the curtain rod for the shower, it fell down on my head, and I realized that it hadn't ever been braced into the wall, so I fixed that. The toilet was running, so I cleaned the little seal and fixed that. And then I picked up one of the pillows and a spider crawled out. Okay, that's part 1. That's part 1 of Xela. Quetzaltenango. My weird, dirty Airbnb. That honestly wasn't that uncomfortable to be in. It was just a weird, more homestay situation that I never got a lock for my own door. And I tried to message her about the lock and then figured I could point out these problems with the apartment afterwards, but she never got back to me before 12 hours was up, and usually it was a day or more, or she didn't get back to me at all. But when she did, she would say, "Oh, do you still want a lock?" And I'd be like, yeah. Okay, I'll bring it right after work today. And I got that like 3 times, and then I never got a lock. Now you might be wondering, then just get your own lock or just leave, go to a different place. I don't mind weirdos, and she was a weirdo just trying to start up the Airbnb business. The bed was comfortable. Everything was clean enough, except the weird dusty floors. Even the black marks in the toilet and the sink, they didn't look like mold. They just looked like a stain that she hadn't got around to scrubbing off yet. I could use the kettle to boil water. It wasn't a huge problem for me. I was only staying a week. It was a fun little adventure that didn't negatively impact me. And it was super quiet at night, so I could record stuff like this pretty easily. But I got into some cool stuff in Xela, and I will talk to you about it on the next Ramble On. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.